I'd love to share with you about near-death experiences and everything that I have sort of learned over the years, how I believed it to be myself from what I had read from other people, and actually what it felt like to go through it myself when I actually died, left my body, and came back. So this subject has fascinated me my entire life. I remember being a 16-year-old and I went to a drive-in with a family friend, and there was a documentary playing at the drive-in. So this is sort of the late 70s, maybe 1978, where the documentary was called Life After Death. And it fascinated me because it was interviews with people that had gone through a near-death experience. They had their physical body had died, heart had stopped, breathing had stopped, and what happened to them, what experience they went through. A lot of people described going through a tunnel, seeing a white light, seeing their relatives that had passed. I vividly remember listening to the story of a young man who had attempted suicide and what he went through when he left his body and he was told to come back. But that feeling of warmth and love that the majority of people feel when they do pass, he didn't feel that. He felt more of an unsettling, a cold energy, almost like he was disgusted in himself for what he had done for taking his life. And so when he had the opportunity to come back, he chose a life of always being kind to others and always helping others. Kind of his way of wanting to compensate attempting to take his life. So I sort of had, from that documentary that I watched, and as I had a teenage brain at that time, like my mind was not expanded at that age, I formed opinions of what I thought happened when we died. Then I read a book by Dr. Albrecht, I think it is, or Dr. Waters. I'll have to find out what the book is, but it was called Beyond the Light. And this doctor had interviewed people that had been through different circumstances. And what I took from that book is that there is some form of judgment. When we have died, we get to look at the way we had lived up until then. Had we been a kind person? Had we been a nice person? Had we done what our soul intended to come to earth to do? Had we lived in fear? I thought before I read the book that maybe there was some kind of judgment, like God would judge us, or like a panel of judges that would say, well, how did you live your life, kind of thing. Maybe that came from, as a child, having to go to church and what had been instilled in me as some form of judgment. Maybe that's why I thought that way. But then when I read the book and I read through experiences, it seemed to be more that people judge themselves, are left to judge themselves. And it's more like, how do you feel like you conducted yourself in life? Do you feel like you could have done better? So that then changed, because I'd read this of what people went through, that kind of changed my thought pattern a bit more, like, oh, we don't get judged by God, we judge ourselves. And our soul knows right from wrong. Our souls always come from a place of love. So if we had have lived a life of evilness or hurting people or killing people, our soul knows that is wrong, and our soul will find that the punishment that soul needs to learn from that. So whether that soul then decides to come back again and have the opposite happen to them to teach them, that seems to feel like the way that I've learned that it is. If you take a life and in a certain, decade that you're alive, and then your soul realizes that is wrong, your soul can choose to come back in another body and have your life taken. So that way the soul then understands both sides of those emotions. So then I read the book, and I always thought I'd love to know what it feels like to die, leave your body, but then be able to come back and have the information. And I got that opportunity. A lot of people think it's a bit weird to be happy that you got a near-death experience, but I have always found it to be something I really needed. I needed that clarity. I had no fear around it. So leading up to what actually happened was I had some breathing problems with my asthma, and this is in the end of 2020, so COVID was around, and I actually had all the symptoms of COVID, but when I had COVID tests, I didn't have COVID, but I was getting very chesty. I couldn't breathe properly. I thought I might have had pneumonia, but I've been back and forward to the doctors with antibiotics, and nothing was fixing it. I didn't have COVID, I didn't have pneumonia, I didn't have bronchitis, but I still was struggling to breathe. So the doctors were just putting it down to asthma. They were just saying you must be not controlling your asthma properly. Anyway, long story short, this particular day, it was around, I think, November 2020. I had a headache on this particular day, and what has come to light now that we did not know at the time, because no one asked me when I was before I went into the hospital, when I was with the ambulance officers, they never asked me, have I taken anything? Did I take any medication? Nobody asked me that. And even after this whole episode, when I was in hospital recovering, still no one asks me, do you remember taking anything? Which seems a little bit strange now. So I think it may have all unfolded how it did because I needed to go through this experience. But anyway, I had taken 2 Disprin in water because I had a headache, and I didn't have any Panadol. I had taken Panadol in the past. I had never had any problems. I don't recall ever having a problem with Disprin, but for some reason, when I took these 2 Disprin, I had an anaphylactic reaction where my airways swelled, my tongue swelled. I was getting air in, but I couldn't get air back out again. I was violently ill, and that was what was causing me to go into this state where I was going to lose my life. So an ambulance was called to my house, and I was so weak, I couldn't stand properly, and I couldn't breathe. It was such a I just could not get air, and I couldn't get it back out again. I just thought, I'm going to die. I knew I was going to die. As I got onto the hospital trolley in my hallway to be taken in the ambulance, I said to the ambulance officers, I'm going to die. I just knew it, but I didn't have any fear. So I'm not sure at that point whether I do recall a mask going onto my face, obviously for oxygen, but I don't recall whether I passed out, whether I died there and then, or whether they gave me a sedative. I don't recall anything. I don't recall being in the ambulance. I was taken to a local hospital, which is like 10 minutes away. Apparently, this information's all been given to me from my kids, because I don't know. I have no recollection of what my physical body was going through that night. So apparently I was in the local hospital for around about 4 hours. They had me stabilized. They had breathing apparatus on me, but I was not breathing on my own. They were breathing for me. So then they made the decision. I got worse and worse and worse, and then they made the decision they were going to either put me in a helicopter and send me to the city hospital, or take me via road ambulance. So they took me via road ambulance. Apparently we got there it's an hour drive, and we got there, I think, in 30 minutes. They were really in a hurry to get me there. Another lady who since has told me that she was waiting in the emergency area with a family member of hers, and they were in the area where the ambulances bring in patients, and they saw me coming in, and she knows who I am. She said they were running like it was an emergency, that they all hands on deck to save you. She said, I think you probably were dead then when you came in. So, because she said the panic that was around you to get you into emergency help was incredible. So do not recall any of that. I don't recall being out of my body and seeing that rushing around or anything like that. What I do recall is I recall knowing that my body was on a bed over there and my energy, my soul, was over here. I know I was totally out of my body, and I was my energy was next to a doctor, and I could see, I knew what the doctor looked like. Like even though you don't have physical eyes when you are a spirit energy, but you can see. It's like using your mind to see. I knew what he looked like. I knew he was married. I knew he had children. I knew what kind of a personality he had created. Never met this doctor in my physical life before at all. Total stranger to me, yet my soul knew his soul. And then my soul kind of moved to a nurse, and I was standing next to this nurse, and I knew how old she was. I knew what she looked like. I knew that she was moving house because something to do with a relationship, and she was moving. Never met this woman before in my life, but I knew all about her. My soul knew everything about her. It's almost like you could, if someone had a book written about them, or they had a whole computer program with all the information of their life, I could tap into it and know it. And I did not, it's like you don't need authority to do it. It's their soul openly shared with my soul. They weren't hiding anything from me. Whereas humans can keep things to themselves. They can keep secrets and not want to share a lot, but a soul doesn't do that. A soul just is open and shares everything, the good, the bad, the ugly, everything. It shares. So I then noted, as I've moved from this nurse, I look across and see a spirit energy coming towards me, which feels like a masculine spirit energy, and I trust him. I know he is here to assist me in some way. I know I'm meant to go with him. I don't know him. I didn't feel like it was a guide, or it didn't feel like an angel, or I didn't have a name or anything like that, but I knew him and I was trusting him. So he started leading me down this. Now, it wasn't a tunnel with a white light like a lot of people see. It was a passageway, and we were the only two in this passageway. It is like a tunnel, but it was clear. It was, I don't know, it was just like this, a clear tube sort of thing. So we were going down, and then I turned that way, and I felt the energy of my mum coming towards me. My mum had passed away about 5 years earlier. What was coming towards me was a ball. It was like a round ball with all these little particles of light moving in the ball. And as it was coming towards me, I knew it was my mother. 100% knew that soul was the soul that lived as my mother. And so she didn't look like Mum did when Mum was alive. She didn't look like a human body with arms, legs and everything. She was this soul that was coming towards me. And I knew it was her. And I felt the love, like this, the love that you feel on the other side is incredibly warm and comforting. It's, you know, even if when we were alive, if my mum and I had a disagreement, or, you know, what if we weren't talking or something like that, there is none of that hatred or anger or all those emotions that we feel on earth in our ego selves. There was none of that. It's just love. Like, I loved the doctor and I loved the nurse. I didn't even know who they were on earth, but I just felt this love for them. And I felt the love from my mum coming to me. It's kind of like, it is the heart connection. It's just the most warmest, beautiful feeling. And my mum did not communicate anything to me. She was just there. It was kind of like I think she knew that I was going to be coming back into my body, and I wasn't going to be staying there. So she was taking advantage of that brief moment in time where she could connect really deeply with my soul before I came back into my physical body. And then behind my mum, I could see all these other souls that I knew. And I could look at this ball of energy, and I knew that was my grandfather. And then I knew my best friend was over there. And then I knew my great-great-grandfather was there, and I'd never met him. He'd like died long before, but I knew him. I knew it was him. I knew what all those souls did in what role they played in my life. There were souls there that were not born yet that I know are going to play a part in my life. So they are like the grandchildren that are going to come into my life in the future. They were there too. They were there with not just the people that had passed that had been in my life, the people that are still coming into my life were there as well. They were all together. It's like this massive big soul family. And I wasn't allowed to stay. I wanted to go and like have a conversation with them all, but this spirit man he said, you don't have time for that. You've got to come with me. So we went down the passageway and he took me into this room that was, I call it the room of knowledge. It was just, it was like, is it, you know, when you push download on the computer and a file comes down and it's stored? It's like that. It's kind of like, or if you read a book and you got, the whole book was given to you in a split second. You knew the whole story. That's what it feels like. It's like they give you this information and it's being fed to you. And there is something in your consciousness that can hold it all, but not recall it now. I know that I haven't recalled all of it now. It's in there, and I will recall it as time goes on. It's something I need for my future, so that's why it was given to me. I can't give it all. I can't recall all the information at once. I have to go through a process before I can access this information. So he gave me all this information, and then he took me back led me back to where my physical body was laying on the bed, and that's when I could see doctors and nurses working on me. There is no concept of time. This could have all happened in 30 seconds. This could have happened in 2 hours. There is no concept of time or how long this happened. I know that I was in hospital in a critical condition for 8 hours before I suddenly came good. Like the doctors said, you died, we were reviving you, you were critical for all that time, and then miraculously you came good as if nothing had ever happened. Everything, all your vital signs went back to normal. Your blood pressure was normal, your breathing was normal, everything went back to normal, like you were just someone who was sleeping. And they couldn't explain it. They couldn't explain like what I'd gone through to suddenly just being totally normal with no effect. So that was about 8 hours, they told me, but I don't know in spirit form how long my journey into the other dimension was. I don't know. So as I came back to the hospital bed, I then could see my physical body laying on the hospital bed, and my spiritual body was above it. I was not fully back in my body. I was hovering above my body. And I could feel the doctors and the nurses were doing things to my physical body, and there were spirits around that were doing things to my spiritual body. It was like I was being healed on both levels. I then saw screens coming in, and they were big square screens that was sending out rays of color into my body. And there was a screen here, there was a screen here, there was a screen here, and there was a screen behind my, they were close to my body, not my head, because I'm laying down. They were like my torso, they were around my torso. And I could see colors coming out of these screens. So it was like your chakra colors, and it was the red, and then the orange and the yellow and the green and the blue and the indigo and the white. It was the colors were 2,000 times more vivid than what I could see with my physical eyes on earth. You know, if I look at a flower, a red flower, and I think that is a gorgeous red, the frequency of color in the other dimensions is so vivid. Like, it's 2,000 times more vivid than what we can conceive with our physical eyes. It is just, the colors are amazing, and the colors hold so much frequency. They feed your body in some way, like you feel it really physically with this frequency of color. So as I'm laying there, the colors are coming into my body, and I felt like, I started to feel like my soul was going down like this, and it was settling into my physical body, and I felt whole. I really felt like, I don't know, like a whole being. The physical and the non-physical was together. And I felt realigned. I felt like they had realigned me. These spirit beings had realigned my core chakra energy system. So maybe it had been out of whack, or I was I obviously needed healing in a spiritual way as well as a physical way. And then I heard the voices say, she can go back now. She can go back now. Now that was a spirit's voice saying she can go back now. I then felt myself in my body. And then the next thing I recall in a physical way is a nurse calling my name, you know, saying, Vicky, Vicky, open your eyes, Vicky. And I opened my eyes and I looked at the nurse and I said, oh, did you see the colours? Did you see the colours? She's like, what colours? I said, oh, the colours are so beautiful. I really want to go back to the colours. I really wanted to go back there. And the feeling of love, that feeling of love is like, it's just glorious. It's like, I know why they call it heaven, because it is a heavenly feeling. It's love, like you're being wrapped in love and you're safe, and it's just so beautiful. And you know, you don't ever get that, even though you can love on earth, you don't ever get that really deep feeling of love, being wrapped in love like you do on the other side. It is just, and I think that's why, you know, once I sort of came out of it and then, you know, started recovering with my health and really started thinking about this experience I went through and trying to put it with what I had learnt from other people going through near-death experiences, I think, you know, like with somebody who's attempted to take their life or committed suicide, when they are so troubled here on earth. So when they get to the other side and they feel that love, it must be so overwhelming for them, because, you know, it was been so hard for them here on earth to feel love for themselves, and then they get over there and they get that love, they get it given to them, and it must be so overwhelming for them to feel that, because that's all they wanted to feel while they were here. And, you know, is that where that judgment comes from? Like, why couldn't I feel that love on earth that I can feel when I've passed? It is, you know, I've spoken to other people that have been through near-death experiences, and they all say that that feeling of love it's indescribable. And It is absolutely beautiful. So it doesn't matter if your life or somebody's life ends tragically, if a person is murdered, if a person is killed in a car accident, if somebody dies in a plane crash, if someone drowns, if someone's burnt in a fire, the circumstances of the physical death, it doesn't matter, because that soul has left the body and that soul goes to that feeling of love. So I think sometimes we can get a bit caught up in feeling pain because we think somebody who died in a horrific way, we think their soul must be lost, like wandering around going, where am I? What happened? I'm in pain. No, no. From everything that I've read and what I experienced, your soul is totally loved and looked after. Like, they were there. My mum was there. My whole family was there. People I knew were there. And there was never a feeling like this guide was guiding me. There was never a feeling of wandering around in this lost world of not knowing where I was or not feeling any kind of love, and no fear. There was none of that. Whether that's to do with, my whole life I have done this kind of spiritual work. I'm a very spiritually connected person and I don't live in fear. So I wonder if my experience came from the way I see things in my physical body, whereas somebody else that sees things who lives in fear, or who doesn't see any kind of connection to their higher self, they may experience being lost for a moment because they don't know what's going on, and they don't know what to expect. So, but most people that I've spoken to, they get that love. They get that feeling of love. And we get to understand the kind of life we lived and forgive ourselves. To learn to forgive ourselves. We weren't making mistakes. We were just doing what we thought we needed at the time. So that was my experience, and as time goes on since I had that experience, I feel like I am very, very different, and a lot of other people that have been through near-death experiences say that their life totally changes afterwards. A lot of people, after they've been through that, become psychics and become very intuitive, where they didn't have that ability before. But I had the ability before, so my experience is more like, I feel like I'm constantly going up levels of knowing, like when I do a reading, it's just the accuracy that's coming through, and I'm getting pictures in my mind basically of if someone spent the day doing something, I can see their whole day, step by step, of what they're doing. And when I say that, it's like I've got a camera on them, like I've watched every moment that they've spent. It's certainly opened up my intuition, even up to a higher level that I didn't even think was possible. So I just wanted to share that with you, because I feel like the more I share it with people, and if you share this with people who may be, even when people have been diagnosed with cancer, and a doctor might say you've only got a certain amount of time to live on this earth, and that can be so fearful of leaving and not feeling like you haven't finished doing things here, like you wanted to experience more. And for some people, it can feel like it's an ending. It's like, it's just all going to stop and I won't get to experience anything. But it's not an ending. It's just a progression. You just move out of the physical world and you go into the non-physical world, and you still experience everybody that's around you. You still are totally connected to all the people that are alive. You're connected with the spirits on the other side. You know everything that's going to happen, and you get the choice to come back again. If there's more that your soul wants to experience, you get to come back again. It's just this constant cycle. It doesn't end. It's not like your life finishes and that's it. That's not how it happens. It just keeps going around and around and around through the dimensions. But I think, you know, as humans, we have the ego inside of us, and the ego loves to hold on to fear. And I think we get more afraid, not so much of what is going to happen to us when we die. It's what our loved ones are going to feel when we've died. Like, so the sadness. And the strangest thing that I felt while I was out of my body in the hospital, I could feel the emotions of my sons and how upset they were, because I knew I was in hospital and I knew I was critical. I could feel their emotions, but I didn't have to fix it. So when I'm alive, like if I'm alive and one of my sons came home and they were upset about something, as their mother, I want to fix it. I want to talk through it with them, you know, and I want to come up with solutions for them, and I want to offer what I can offer. But when I was in a non-physical state, when I was a soul and I could feel their sadness, I didn't have to fix it. I knew they were going to be okay. I knew that they could work through it. It's like this total acceptance of how everybody feels. If there was somebody that I did not particularly like, what, you know, on earth, or they didn't like me, or, you know, we had an altercation through our lives where there was an argument and we parted ways, and we didn't sort of, we never repaired anything, you know, we just walked away from each other's lives. When I died, I had total empathy and love for that person. Even though I may not have liked them on earth, or they did something to harm me, my spirit energy had total love and empathy for that person. There is no hatred. There's not hatred. I think when you come across, you know, when a place is haunted, or a place, you know, there's a poltergeist in a place, and it's like an evil energy, and you can sometimes walk into a place and feel an evil energy. I often wonder if that's not an active soul. I wonder if that is an imprint of the energy of that person. When they were alive, they were so troubled. They left an imprint of that energy there, which that's what, and then, because energy is energy, it connects all the time. So if you went into a haunted house and it was, you know, there was a ghost in there and people were doing ghost tours, the people that are going into the house have got fear. And that energy that was already living had so much fear, it's left a massive imprint of fear. And then you've got people coming into that place that have got fear. That feeds off of it, and then the fear gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And then more and more people that go into that like house, and then they see spirits, it's more prominent because that fear energy has grown. So I think that's more, because I don't feel like there's spirits wandering around that are actually evil and horrible. I think it's the imprint of what they left in that area, of how troubled that soul was when they were alive. So yeah, that's my way of sharing with you what I went through. I hope that you never have to fear death. You know, you probably do fear having to leave people, but you don't leave them. I felt closer to my children when I had died than I do alive. Like, I feel like I have a great relationship with all my family, and I love them very dearly, and I'm very close with them, but I was even closer to them when I had died. It's just the most beautiful feeling. So please never fear death. Don't fear that your loved ones are lost somewhere, or they're not happy, or they are in the most beautiful place. And until you actually, you know, I can tell you my story, everybody else that's been through this can share their story, and you may want to believe it's true, but until you actually go through it and understand it, it's hard to understand. You may have a certain belief system that's blocking you from understanding that they are all in the most beautiful place of love. And I just hope that you remember that. So thank you again for listening to me and my story.